episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Welcome to episode 93 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Have you thought of building a home-based studio? Ron and Jo are both yoga teachers who live, teach, and host a podcast together. It's called the Flow Artist Podcast, and it's based in Australia. Ron and Jo had a home studio, and then they built a new one. Today's episode gets into some of the nitty-gritty details of building and sustaining a home studio. Huge thanks to those of you who are sharing this podcast with other yoga teachers and sharing it on social media. This is such a nice gift of thanks when you find a key takeaway or something that you are implementing in your yoga business from one of our episodes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Here are some words from two of our listeners. Loretta Curtin from Australia says, "This podcast is a must for any yoga teacher. It's like doing your own teacher training from home for free. Thanks, Shannon." Well, thank you, Loretta Curtin. It is amazing to hear back from you that this is helping you along the way. I'm still a big fan of going out to yoga teacher trainings, connecting with real people in real time and getting support and help there. But I know we can't all do that all the time. So I love to hear that this podcast is supporting you. Also, Nikki754 from the United States says, "This is my favorite yoga podcast, and it helps me with the details of running my small private yoga business more so than any other podcast. Shannon gives expert practical advice in a kind and simple to follow voice, as well as the voices of her guests, and never makes you feel less than intelligent for not knowing anything. I have personally benefited tremendously from her advice on how to create a website and use her helpful downloadable material all the time." This is so good, Nikki. This motivates me to keep going. Sometimes I feel like I ask too many questions, and there are times where I actually doubt, like, oh my gosh, do I know enough to be doing this? And I think it's that I'm able to be vulnerable and ask the questions. So I want to say, don't be afraid to do that in your own life. I feel like we're all just walking around not really knowing. And when I talk to experts out there, you're going to hear from some in the next few months, some big experts who basically say, I don't know anything. And I feel like they are the leading person in their field, and that's how they're feeling as well. I think the more we learn, the more questions we have. Okay, if you are a new listener, hi, my name is Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of three, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you go through and navigate the jungle of yoga entrepreneurship. And I want to know, have you checked out our show notes yet? This one, including all of the links, is at theconnectedyogateacher.com/93. And there are other resources on our website, so make sure to go and check those out as well. We have online trainings and workshops, articles, and a map where you can add your contact information. And I hear from some of you saying, like, where is a good yoga class I'm traveling to here? The map is the place to go. And it's also a great way to add yourself to the global Connected Yoga Teacher map so that people can find you when they're out traveling, or maybe they even find you because they're your next door neighbor. Before I share more today, let's hear our hot tip of the week from Schedulicity.
Hi, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Allison with Schedulicity and the hot tip of the week. While you're working to create a meaningful studio space in your home, consider setting up the workspace on your phone or computer in the same way. Fill one of your home screen pages on your phone with each app you use for work. Or, if you prefer to work out of a browser, line your bookmarks bar with the sites you use for your business. Now, no matter where you are, your digital office will be ready for you.
Thank you, Schedulicity. And thank you also because this week my life got a lot easier when I wanted to launch a program, like within 5 days. It was, for some of you who know, I launched this beta program and I wanted people to be able to sign up, to pay, to have all of their information in there. And the easiest way for me to do that is through Schedulicity, because it's connected with Stripe. People can pay and book on there. You're going to hear Ron and Jo talk about how Schedulicity isn't available where they are in Australia, and how Ron actually went through and made his own scheduling software This is way beyond my expertise. And so today I'm just really grateful for Schedulicity and being able to not have to code and create a piece of software to be able to book people in. Okay, let's dive in and meet Ron and Jo. Jo, Stewart, and Rane Bowen live in Australia. As I said before, they're both yoga teachers. Jo has been teaching for over 10 years and has completed over 2,000 hours of teacher training. Ron is a newer yoga teacher who took a 350-hour yoga teacher training after being diagnosed with stomach cancer and having his stomach removed in 2015. Ron is actually from New Zealand and now has moved to Australia. I'm so excited that you get to hear today how Ron and Jo are such a great fit together. They are fun and lighthearted, and at the same time, they have a lot of really deep insights and actionable steps on how to build and maintain not only a yoga studio, but also their own personal yoga practice. We got into that today. If you have not listened to their podcast yet, make sure to go and check it out. Again, the link will be in our show notes. I really loved their first official episode together titled, I'm a Yoga Teacher, Now What? Actually, I also really follow them on social media, and I have to say that I want to go to their studio. If they were closer to me, I would find a way to get there. And I've thought, if I fly to Australia, that's the yoga studio I want to go and attend. So you might even be curious about following them on social media to see how they engage their audience and how they showcase their studio. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Ron and Jo. It is fantastic to have you here.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here. Thanks for having us.
Tell our listeners a little bit about both of you. What got you started in yoga, and do you remember your first yoga class?
Can't really remember my first yoga class or what drew me there, but I was actually studying art at university when I discovered yoga, and it just helped me so much in that time. Like, I think I was really enjoying creating and making things, but just that environment of the art school and questioning yourself, and like there was a lot of pressure around something that I loved previously, and yoga just kind of got me out of that tortured artist paradigm. Like, it really helped me creatively, but also just mentally and emotionally. I just got so many benefits from it. I was finishing up art school. I kind of just thought to myself, oh, well, this would be like a nice kind of fulfilling day job that I could do for a few hours a week and do my art. And I just kind of worked out that actually my life would be a lot happier if I just did yoga as my kind of vocation, I guess, and did art for fun on the side rather than the other way around.
Oh, I love it. So it completely switched things around in your life then.
Definitely, yeah.
And for myself, I think my first class was probably maybe a bit before the year 2000, and one of my housemates was going to this class that was just around the corner, and he told me I should come along, and I went along, and I think it was an Ashtanga class, and it was actually, it was pretty strong, and I remember I actually even collapsed during one part of the class, but I felt really good afterwards, and I started going to this person's class for a while after that, and I sort of drifted away from it for ages, and then many years later, I met Jo, who was teaching yoga, and started back up again, strangely enough.
Oh my gosh, so your first class, you actually collapsed in the class?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't as possibly as dramatic as I'm making out now.
Like a chaturanga that just ended up on the ground kind of thing.
I remember being quite... I remember thinking, wow, this is pretty intense.
You must have got something out of it, though.
Oh,
if you
yeah,
went
no,
back.
I loved it. I felt great afterwards. It was really good.
Yeah. Sometimes people, I think, will go to yoga and then think, oh, wow, this is a lot harder. I thought we'd be sort of sitting around and meditating. And, and then if they pick pick a more vigorous class, especially. So then what led you both to start the podcast?
Well, we were talking about this earlier today, actually. I've been a big fan of podcasts for quite a while, I guess. I really love how, as a media, it's like someone's sort of talking into your ears, whispering into your ears. So it's really intimate. And, I really enjoy your podcast. I really enjoy, say, Jay Brown's yoga talks. And I was doing my yoga teacher training and I didn't have any time. And suddenly, after I finished that, I had all the spare time. So I wanted to do a podcast and I didn't know what to do it about. And then one day I remember talking to Jo and seeing if she wanted to do it with me, and she did. And so we sort of suddenly had a team. So it just sort of...
I think as well, we'd had a few conversations where, especially when Rane was studying, we'd just get into talking about some aspect of like yoga philosophy or, just yoga in general. And, like we'd get right into the conversation. So I think we kind of... like we weren't recording it or anything, but a few of our just day-to-day conversations kind of could be a yoga podcast. Like that's what we love and that's what we're into and that's what we talk about with each other, and that's how we kind of figure some stuff out sometimes in that discussion format.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love your podcast, and I actually had gone back and listened to your first episode together, and it's quite good. I would encourage our listeners to go and listen, especially if you're a newer yoga teacher, which I know a lot of our listeners are. It's not the very first intro, but it was the first one that you guys did together, and it was kind of like, I'm a yoga teacher, now what? That was a good one.
Thank you. Interesting kind of timing, because it's a year on from that. And we just recorded an episode this afternoon, which is I'm a yoga teacher now, 1 year later? So we're kind of picking up where we left off from that one.
Oh, wow. I love it. So we'll link to both of those for sure then. I think that's so helpful just to hear kind of your journey. So about your journey, specifically with opening a yoga studio, lots of our listeners will ask now I want to open a yoga studio, or what are the pros and cons of having a yoga studio? So what led you to decide, okay, now it's time to open a yoga studio?
I actually pretty much always wanted to do my own home space from teacher training. And I think some of it is I just don't really like being told what to do. So I kind of wanted to have my own space where I could do whatever I want. And I'm also someone who is quite risk averse. I never liked the idea of signing a lease and kind of having a whole lot of financial pressure on me as a new business was growing. So it always just kind of made sense to me to just do it at home.
Right. So when did you open this space then? Tell us about that journey.
So the space that we started with, we were looking to buy a home, and we actually purchased our house on the basis of, okay, where is someone that we can have a home studio space in? And we're even looking at big warehouse type spaces, and we were thinking we'd have something like that. And it just wasn't viable. They were either massive factory spaces or they'd already been redeveloped and were way too expensive for us. So we ended up getting a little kind of cottage house that had a kind of garage out the back. The woman who lived here before us was a DJ, so she'd already kind of finished it. It had walls, it had insulation, it had a little window, and that's where I started teaching. Just 3 aerial hammocks. I had to get an engineer and a builder to re-engineer the ceiling of it so it would be structurally sound for that. And it was in our garden, which fitted the name of my business, which is Garden of Yoga. And I think I really like decorating and making spaces. And we also both quite like hosting. We like doing parties and events as well. And that kind of serves me well as making it my own space. I like the other aspects of it as well as teaching.
And so you've just redone your space, because I've been watching on Instagram and wishing I was closer.
Oh, I wish you could come visit.
Yeah,
So
someday.
It was always the plan to start small and then renovate it in the future. And so it was like 2013 when we kind of did that first space, and we've just reopened again after about 4 months of demolishing, rebuilding, renovating, and we've been open in our new space for about 6 weeks
Not
now.
to mention the several years of...
Oh, yeah, like 5 years of like planning permission
permissions
and, you know, saving and organising and finding the right builder and the right architect and all of that.
Wow. So it's basically been in the works for 5 years then.
Yeah.
And so when you built this new space, you completely started from scratch then?
Yeah, we had to demolish our old space. And I was really scared about that because I was like, oh no, I'm not going to have a business for this time. And what if it, you know, there's delays and things don't go smoothly. And I'm sure you've experienced this. You know, even if you go away for a couple of weeks, like it takes things a while to get back on track. Like people's routines are disrupted, and I was concerned about that because I do teach at other places, but my home studio was, I guess, about half of my classes each week.
Right.
But it actually has been the opposite. Like it's been so great. Like everyone was really following our progress and really excited about the reopening. And so that's been a really lovely experience. And so many people just posted and saw me in the street. They're like, when are you opening again? So that was a really nice part of it.
I think we also, we kept people informed of the progress of the studio as well. And, you know, we shared a lot on social media, but not out of any sort of sense of obligation or anything. It was just because it was actually really
we're just really excited
to see the studio suddenly grow up out of the ground. So, yeah, no, that was pretty cool.
And, like, sometimes I struggle with social media, but the studio build was, like, my easiest social media ever. Like, I think because we were just so excited to share, and there was, like, something to share and something to document. I mean, we were like, we've poured a slab. And, you know, like, I did a hoop dance on it, right? Did some handstands. We're like, we've got a wall. So, yeah.
Well, that's really fun.
We're pretty easily excitable.
Well, and it was fun just to follow along and see and be part of that. So I think that's an amazing thing that anyone who's thinking of doing a studio is they could even start, you know, as soon as that moment where it would be easy to share and it's exciting. That's a great point.
Absolutely. And it means that you can share things like before you open, and that's when you're the busiest. So when you're in the planning phase, like that's actually when you've got a little bit more time to post and to share. Like when you're just launching a new business, there's so much other stuff going on. You don't want to leave all of your promotion and stuff till then. Like get started early and like share your vision and share your ideas.
Yeah. So because you teach at other spaces, what does it feel like? What are the challenges then of having your own space? Let's start there.
It's all on me. So at other places, I just rock up, teach my class, that's all I do. But when it's your home space, you have to tell people about it. You have to get that message out to people. Be prepared as well. There'll be plenty of classes where just one person shows up, and that's fine at home. Like you're already there. You haven't traveled an hour to get there. You haven't paid extra to rent this space. So you've just got to like roll with that. And it's made me really comfortable teaching individuals and small groups because that's mainly what I do at home, and that's perfect for that smaller scale environment. And there's also a lot of the behind the scenes admin stuff that goes with it. Like I get lots of phone calls for people inquiring about the studio. Every now and again someone rocks up at the front door to ask about it, which I definitely don't encourage, but that happens. People cancel at the last minute. People often, not often, people have asked me to rearrange my timetable so that they can come to specific classes and then have not shown up. Like all those things happen. And they're all lessons, and a lot of them are lessons about having clear boundaries and just being really clear about how you're going to communicate with people and not doing things like replying to text messages at 11 o'clock on Sunday night because that just tells people you're available for, you know, business then.
Right. Oh, that's so good. So it's kind of like you have all of the responsibilities, but on the other side of that, you have to take responsibility for yourself, like as a business. Okay, these are my boundaries. That's really good.
Yeah, definitely. And it so is reflected if you are not putting a lot of energy into your home space, you don't often get a lot of people coming. Like you really have to put it out there all the time, and even in kind of interesting ways. Like sometimes the studio's been quiet and I've just done a really big tidy up and rearrange, and I haven't even told anyone about that, but then new people will inquire. So it's kind of, I feel like if you aren't putting good energy in, then that's not going to come back to you and it's not going to be fulfilling. There's definitely like peaks and troughs in terms of busyness, which you notice a lot more at home than when you're teaching at a gym or at a workplace. So some of it's not taking that stuff too personally, but then there's also those little things like, okay, things are a bit quiet. What can I do that will just make me feel good about being in this space? Or what can I fix up on my website? Or what can I put energy into doing online? So I'm still kind of working on my business when there aren't that many students today.
Right. And so how many students can you fit in your space?
I can have 8 people in aerial hammocks and 1 for me, and then about 12 to 15 people on mats. And then if it was a meditation class, I don't know, maybe 20 or...
Yeah, we
haven't pushed the limits of how many people we could fit in for a meditation class, but 12 mats is comfortable, 15 is pretty squeezy.
Mm-hmm. And we've got about 15 or so fold-out chairs that we could probably put in for, meditation or meet-up type groups as well.
Right. Oh, that's nice. And so what are the big pros of having your own space? So you went over some of them that... in terms of you like to be your own boss and set your own thing, and also it cuts down on travel time. What are some of the big things that you really feel now that you've, even if it's just opening the new space or the space previous?
Well, I really like being able to just walk out the back door and you're in your workspace. So that's really good. And I think I've been teaching a few classes at gyms and a couple of community classes, and there's absolutely no props. So one thing I really like is out there we've got everything we need, and yeah, it's just a lot more comfortable. It's almost like you're just going and hanging out with some people and sharing some stuff that you really enjoy doing with them, and the space just behind your own house is just, it's really good.
A massive pro is we have an awesome space to do our own yoga practice in. So we tend to do our own practice every morning, and we also sometimes will just hang out in the studio because it's kind of bigger than our house. All the rooms in our house are really little, and the studio is really expansive and open and light-filled. So we'll often just chill out there and do some low-key rolling around on the floor, rolling on rollers and stuff, yoga. The other thing is, like, we can teach whatever we want. So if we want to do a really niche class or just something that appeals to us, like, we've got the freedom to do that, and we've got the freedom to promote it in any way that we want to. We can charge whatever we want, or we can do free events. Like, I guess you already mentioned freedom, but it's kind of creative freedom as well. Like, we've really got this space that we can turn into, whatever we like.
Oh, that's fantastic. So also I want to go back to when you were building and planning, because you said a key piece of this was saving up for it. So did you save up 100% of the expenses?
No, my parents were really generous. My parents helped us out a lot.
Yeah. And so having that, like, I feel like that's still, you had the money, invested it, and did it. And so you don't have a big, like, say, overhead loan back to the bank, to make payments.
Yeah, we still have a mortgage on our house.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's not a business-specific expense. Like, that's something we'd be paying anyway.
Right. And so if you're comfortable sharing, tell our listeners, how does it work in terms of profit, just looking at when you go outside of the home to teach, like say if you're traveling to town and teaching a class versus teaching a class at home, if you just take kind of an example of a class?
Well, average rate to teach a class in a gym in Australia is probably about $60. And in my home studio, I would charge someone $35 full or $30 concession for an aerial class. So if I even have 2 students at home, that is what I would make for teaching a gym class with travel time there and back.
Right. So it pays off pretty quickly. So
it's a lot
then.
better, definitely. The flip side of that is there are those key times at home, like that 6 till 7, or, you know, a little bit later is fine as well, like say 7:15 till 8:15, which is a great time to have a class in the evening that everyone wants to go to. But there are times during the day where I could possibly have private classes, but, you know, that wouldn't be the time when I'd fill up a class. So you have limited time spots, I think, and in that smaller space, you just want to make the most of those. So I still teach corporate classes and I still teach a few gym classes just to kind of round out my own schedule in those times when it's just not as viable to have a class at home.
Right. And so do you both mainly teach yoga full-time? Is that your full-time gig, or do you have other outside jobs as well?
Well, I work as a web developer. I've actually cut down to 3 days a week doing that. I'm pretty lucky there, and I guess I wouldn't say I'm teaching full time the rest of the week, but I am doing things sort of around our business. Like as I said, I'm a web developer, so I'm working on our website and making some changes to that, and I've sort of built a bit of a booking system for us, so we don't have to pay for
Mindbody.
Yeah, Mindbody. That I haven't heard the most encouraging things about. So,
like the fact that Ryan built our booking system as well, it also gives us that freedom of like, oh, we're going to teach a class like this, and he can just build that into the system.
Sort of maybe non-standard pricing arrangements, or, you know, we can, I think when Jo had a lot of strange requirements when she had 3 people in the class, so it was a certain price for 1 person and a different price for 2 people and a different price again for 3, so we could sort of build that into it, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. That makes total sense. That's the way I teach one of my classes if we ever run a group class at the physio office. And it's hard to explain that to people. Like, the more people that sign up, the less it's going to be because it's like a private class. Yeah. That's amazing then that you have this as well, that you can work on the website. But not only that, it sounds like you have a lot of computer skills, because I can work on my website, but I certainly couldn't build a scheduling system.
I guess so. And, you know, I'm still ironing out the kinks. We're still...
it's evolving.
It's evolving. And but I think, that is something we have there. And I guess also as I've become interested in working on video content, and so that's something we want to do down the line a little bit as well. But I guess that's a whole nother skill set or group of skill sets altogether as well that we'll have to...
But like Ryan's really great at learning new skills.
I guess I'm speaking as well as the production, there's also the presentation, and there's a lot of work required there, I think, on my end at least.
Right.
And that was also kind of our vision for building our new space, to have a beautiful space that would be great to film things in as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. It definitely is a beautiful space. I was watching you, Ron, you just posted, I think it was on Instagram, you were like doing this handstand, and then all of a sudden there was a bit of air guitar at the end. So I think that's the key piece. You guys have like fun videos as well to watch. And so, Jo, what about you? Are you full-time teaching?
Yeah, I teach full-time. I teach yoga and Pilates and the aerial yoga as well.
So what are some of the things that you feel like if someone is thinking of opening their home studio and they're wondering, what do I need first? Like, what are the things that really make your space?
Well, I think one thing that you do need is enough space. And I've been to a few home studios and seeing, like, some people can really make some interesting situations work. Like, there's this beautiful meditation studio in Albert Park, and it's actually in his kitchen and dining area at the rear of his house, but he just keeps the kitchen so clean and zen, and there's no furniture. Like, you see the cupboards and you see the sink and everything, but the rest of it is just an open space, and it actually feels perfect for a meditation. And I've got another, my Pilates mentor, Louise Taub, has a beautiful Art Deco apartment, and it's just in what would be a bedroom in her apartment, and she has her Pilates equipment in there and teaches classes for 3 or 4 people. So it doesn't have to be a big space, but I think it's really important that it's a clean space. Like, I think people feel uncomfortable if you have your couch and, you know, like your clutter and your photos up. Like, I think people then feel like it's a bit like I'm in someone else's home, and they don't settle in the same way that you would in a yoga class in a more neutral space. So I think, yeah, it doesn't have to be big, but you either have to be dedicated to like clearing out all of your clutter or make it as a dedicated yoga space. I think you have to have a bit of a following, because people aren't generally going to stumble across your classes at home. So you can teach your friends at home, that's great, but I think it would be great to have a few corporate classes in offices nearby, or a few local gym classes, or maybe build something up in a room that you hire or in a park or something, because, yeah, people aren't just going to knock at your door. Like, you have to have a little bit of a following. Or I guess you could build that online as well. You could share some video content and kind of reach out to people that way. I think you also have to have that sense of, like, taking it seriously. You know, like, it's one thing to teach a few classes in your lounge room, but it's another thing to be like, this is my studio, this is my space. And I think people pick up on that.
I think it's also, for example, our backyard was a building site for 3 months, so that's something to really think about whether you want to have going on for a while. And I guess there's also practical concerns, like we had to get planning permission, and we were sort of in it for the long haul, I guess. And I know of some other people who've sort of not had as good luck with the council as we have either,
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile just checking with your local council. And I've always just called them, told them exactly what I was planning to do, and checked if that was okay and legal. And I've never had a problem. Like, the places I've lived, it's been classed as a home occupation, and that's totally fine. Depends how many people you have and if you have other teachers teaching there. But I have, when this issue is raised on the internet, there's always all these concerns about, like, oh, your neighbours are going to hate it, or they're going to complain to the council. So it's kind of good to know where you stand, and just to be super upfront with, like, yep, this is what I've got planned. And I've never had issues with neighbours complaining or anything. But say you're in an area where parking was a bit of an issue, like just letting your students know not to park in other people's spots, or, not to be noisy if you're doing early morning classes, because, I mean, ideally your neighbours will be telling people about your studio. You definitely don't want to have any bad relations with people coming and going.
Right. So do you live where you have neighbours pretty close by then as well?
We do, but we live on a really busy street in the inner city. So we have a big shopping centre across the road. We have a lot of traffic.
I think we're lucky, actually, in a sense. We have a lot of foot traffic, and people have just sort of walked past, seen the sign and knocked on the door and asked about it. So, yeah.
And it's really interesting. We have a yoga studio, which is big, with big signs. Like, literally, I don't know, it's the next block.
Yeah.
And I have this little sign that I made myself in our front yard, and, like, people just, like, kind of knock on the door to, say hi and see what's happening.
Oh, that's amazing. So in terms of then props, because that's the next question that people always ask, like, what do I have to have? Do you have mats for everyone? You said that you have all the props there that you need. What do you think are the essential props?
Oh, you definitely need mats for everyone. I have everything. I have a Pilates reformer. I have aerial hammocks. Sometimes I'm not sure if buying a studio is just an excuse to buy more props, because I'm like, oh, I need that for the studio. And because we're, like, a really inclusive space, and we want to teach classes that can cater for a really broad range of people and different injuries and different size bodies, I kind of do want to have enough props so that everyone feels comfortable and supported, and that I can just give them the best practice that I can. So I guess it depends on what style you teach. So you want to just have all the things that you're going to need for your class to go smoothly. But I also don't have completely conventional props. Like, we don't have 15 bolsters, but I've got a lot of other cushions of different sizes, and sometimes you can use blocks with like one bolster on top instead of like 4 bolsters stacked up. So I think maybe think about the class that you're going to teach and then think about what props you're going to need, rather than feeling like you've got a kit out with all of these hypothetical props.
I think just quietly, one of our cushions might be a dog bed. It was a brand new dog bed, but it's covered in a very beautiful
it's got a beautiful mandala print on it, but it's a dog bed that's round.
It's really comfortable. It's fantastic.
Because like bolsters are expensive. So after all of the renovation, I was like, well, what can I use instead of having to buy 15 bolsters?
That is really smart.
We managed to find these fold-out chairs from a local store for, I think they were like $8 each, and they're fine. You don't need to.
You don't need a $70 yoga chair.
Right.
Or maybe you do if you're taking the back off and doing lots of complicated Iyengar things, but I don't need a $70 yoga chair.
Right. That's really good. Really, really good. I know that was one of the biggest struggles when I was always traveling to spaces that didn't have props, was hauling everything there. Like, I just wouldn't even do more than a one-on-one restorative class because I couldn't take all of the props. So it's nice. And then do you have other teachers coming in, or is it just the two of you then teaching at the space?
At the moment, it's just the two of us. We wanted to just establish the space kind of just with us before we started bringing other teachers in.
And we also wanted to have a free week when we first open as well. And there'd be an extra overhead of paying other teachers to be involved in that, but it was quite good with just the two of us, I think.
And I think because before in the space, it was just me, and now it's the two of us. So we wanted to kind of find our own groove of running it together before, and kind of establish the systems organically before we bring in other people, where you do just need to have that next level of organisation and account keeping. And I think if we're going to bring another teacher in, we just want to have everything organised in place.
So it's easy to just hand over, or just tell them this is how
we do things.
So, but we are intending to sort of host workshops and hire out the space for other events, which will be events that we really want to have here. So
and we do want to have potentially another teacher in the future so that we can take a holiday because otherwise you have to like shut up shop, and that is one of those things that does really kill your business.
Right, because people really rely on their classes and want them to continue. Yeah.
And you feel a real sense of responsibility for people. You don't want to just like leave them high and dry. Like, I was feeling like that when I closed to renovate, because people establish such a rhythm with their practice, and when you disrupt that, sometimes like that's it.
Right. So one teacher that I know, she runs a 6-week series, and then she always takes the week in between those two off. So it's like she runs 6 weeks, she has that week off, and then starts up the next 6 weeks. So people would miss then 1 week, and they know it's coming each time. She runs her own in-home studio. So that's...
Yeah, that would be a good way to do it as well.
Yeah. And so when you said setting up the systems, what I'd like to do is just sort of walk through if I were a new student and I lived close enough and I saw on your website, like I can go to that's where I would probably find it, website. Do you make posters or do you advertise anywhere else?
I made postcards, And I'll share as well, when we were about to open the studio, we had a free class, which was to take photos in so that we could use them in our website and on our postcards and everything. And we totally told people, we're like, we need some pictures for our website. We want to welcome everyone to a new studio. Come and have a free class. And it was one of the best things that I've done in terms of building excitement for our new business. And now I have a really great file of pictures that I can draw from for my social media and for my cards. And like, I think those are the pictures you've noticed, like just the energy in them, like everyone just seems so happy and excited to be in the space. So it was this like really lovely boost for us to kind of get that appreciation and to feel like we're on the right track with things. And sometimes you feel like, well, I would never take photos of people in class without permission. And even with permission, it's a little bit awkward because it pulls people out of the moment. But when people have signed up for a free class and we're like, yes, we're doing this so that we can take some pictures, you pretty much have free rein to take pictures. People are totally comfortable with that. They wouldn't have come to that picture-taking class if they weren't. And then I was able to put one of those pictures of everyone having a great time on my postcard, and like I haven't had that much success with print advertising before, but so many people picked up that postcard and found the studio that way. So that really worked for me.
I have a funny story about this. Jo's mum was handed one by a person who worked at the place that was renovating their bathroom.
Yeah, they got around.
Oh, I love it. Well, there are a few things that I love about this story. One is when you touched on that it is an uncomfortable thing to take pictures of people in classes. So I often see this thread happening in our Connected Yoga Teacher group. People are asking, like, how do you get those photos, or what are your policies around photos? And some have it that they get someone to sign and then they can take videos or photos at any time. And for me, I feel like I would not, as a teacher personally, or being a student in a class, it would feel very strange to then see a video of Shavasana if I didn't know it was.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And so this idea of getting everyone excited about it, I'm sure what came through also in those photos is these are the real people showing up. Like, you didn't hire all yoga teachers or all, like, I don't know, you didn't stage it in any way. You said, come do this class. We'll be in the yoga. And so that translates through. That's really amazing. That's very inspiring.
Oh, thank you. And that was actually something we really wanted to emphasize, because we're a body positive studio. We're really inclusive, and we really wanted to show like different ages, different body types, just like yoga is for everyone. And we kind of put something a little bit like that in our Facebook post, that we just really wanted to reflect the diversity of different people who come to our studio. And thankfully it wasn't all just yoga teachers who heeded the call. I think maybe if we hadn't have kind of emphasized that, maybe some people might have thought, oh no, like, I'm not good enough at yoga, I won't come to the photo thing. So I think it really is helpful to like emphasize that, like, this is for everyone.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so then people could find your postcards, even they traveled around. I love that. Or they could go through your website. And then when they sign up through your own scheduling app or thing on your website. And then they get to the class. How do they pay? Can they pay online, or do they pay at the studio?
They can do it either way. They can pay online when they book, or they can pay in person. And I have a little Square reader, so I can just tap people's credit card when they come to the studio, and they can pay that way, or they can pay cash.
Right. And so if they pay online, is it also through Square?
It's through Stripe.
Yeah.
Stripe. Okay. And then they do the class. They can get a mat from you. Is the mat free?
Oh, yeah. I feel like it's really mean charging people to hire a mat at a yoga studio. Like, seems like it should be kind of a given.
I know. I've been to so many studios, and then like, it's $2 a mat.
Because I just built it into the cost of the class.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay. And then do you have any other policies that you've had to pull over from the previous space or new now? Like, Let me see, in terms of parking or kind of rules that you had to establish?
Well, we live across the road from a big shopping centre, so I just tell people to park at the plaza. I do encourage. Oh, I have a 15-minute gap between my classes, so I do have on my website, like, if you're earlier than 15 minutes, you might disturb the class before. So I think that's just how I phrase it. Also, when there's small classes, like, we do have a cancellation policy, which is, if you cancel less than 24 hours before the class, then you'll be charged for that. I have the usual rules about switch off your phone, and I don't. Oh, actually, I do have it on my new client form. I have a paragraph about ahimsa. So this is a practice about honouring your body and listening to your body and taking personal responsibility, letting the teacher know if there's any kind of issues that have come up for you, and just being kind to yourself in the practice. And that's kind of built into my disclaimer at the end of that form. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I think that sometimes I've heard from people who have an at-home studio, and eventually at some point you have to develop policies of some sort, like you said, with the cancellation. And it's really great if listeners are thinking, oh, I want to establish a studio, to think about those things ahead of time so that you don't hit that uncomfortable spot.
Put them in your website in writing.
Right.
And maybe even in the follow-up email that people get when they book, so they're sort of surprised to people when they cancel. I must say, there are different situations where I wouldn't apply a cancellation fee if someone has an emergency or something. I don't want to penalise them for that, but it puts people in that good system, I guess, of letting me know that they're cancelling and not just not showing up. Like, there's the expectation that they'll let me know if they can't make it to class.
Yeah.
And people will be expecting that if they cancel at the last minute, there'll be a fee.
That's such a good point, that if you have that policy in place, you then have the freedom to say, well, this thing came up in your life and I really want to cancel the cancellation fee.
Especially if it's like a regular person and, it's one of those just out of the blue events. Yeah. And also if something really terrible has happened to one of your students that you care about, like, you don't want to charge them a fee for it.
Yeah. And so then how do you keep in touch with students in between your classes?
We do a mail out. We're pretty sparse with our mail outs. Like, I don't know if it's like the garden thing, but we tend to send out one a season. Like, I feel like that's when I have stuff to say. I think Instagram is where I'm the most regular. I pretty much post every day at the moment. And then I share on my Facebook group as well. But I found, just like with Facebook these days, I don't get nearly as much response from my Facebook posts as I do from my Instagram ones.
Yeah, I've been noticing that as well lately. So you have a Facebook group and a business page?
We have the Flow Artist podcast group, and I have just my Garden of Yoga business page. And I like my personal Facebook page as well. I have a lot of yoga teachers on there and students who are also friends. So I kind of almost see my personal page as an extension of my business. Like, I share things on there when I'm doing events and things, and I'm not someone who, anything I put on my personal page, I'm pretty much happy for everyone to see. That's kind of how I do that one.
Do you teach mainly group classes or one-on-one classes?
I do teach mainly group classes, but I definitely have a few one-on-one classes in the mix, and I have a few one-on-one students who I've been seeing for years and years. There's one person in particular who I think I've been teaching him for like about 7 or 8 years, and that's the one person that I go to their house. And it's like this lovely Indian couple. He has MS, so I've been working with him through that. And like, they make me dal every week that I take home for us to eat for dinner. Like, they're so beautiful.
Oh, That's so nice.
It's so nice. And so when you've got people like that in your week as well, like that's really what makes yoga teaching such a beautiful experience. So I've got them, and then I've got another regular one-on-one person who I see every week. And I have quite a few people who don't come every week, but come regularly, because some people with their own practice, they don't actually need to see me every week. They just need to see me if something changes, or they just need to kind of add a few new things into the mix to kind of feel like they're still progressing with their practice. So yeah, I do teach mainly small group classes, I guess.
Nice. And then so for both of you, what do you feel is like a thing that's on the horizon? You talked about maybe online yoga. Where does it feel like things are going if you could dream big for your business?
I feel like in the aerial yoga world, there's definitely, like, I'm one of the more senior aerial yoga teachers in Melbourne, so I would love more inspiration in my own teaching and practice, and so that's something that we'd love to share. And I feel like I've got kind of a different take on aerial yoga to a lot of what's out there. Like, I'm a lot more about the interoceptive, more subtle movements, like using the hammock for stability, using the hammock for different size bodies, and kind of support for making yoga more accessible. So I'd love to be able to kind of share what I do in my own practice to other people all around the world who might be into that or might be working with their own issues. Those are some of the one-on-one people who come to me as well, people who have their own hammock at home and don't have a teacher near them, or just like to do their own practice. So I think there would be, like, there's actually quite a demand for that kind of, I guess, one-on-one but not in-person teaching.
And yeah, I guess as far as online content goes, I'm not 100% sure what exactly I want to make as content, but I do know I want to develop the technical skills to be able to present some really beautiful images and just be able to share what we teach with as many people as possible, I guess.
And I guess as well, like, what we really want to do with our home studio, as we've kind of said, is make it like really inclusive and really welcoming. But I think there are still people who feel like nervous or anxious about going into a yoga studio. So it would be nice to reach those people in that like safe comfort of their own home and let them experience the practice that way. And then also kind of hopefully help them feel confident that they could go and join a group class, because like yoga's for everyone.
Oh, yes. I was riding the bus to the airport recently, and there was a woman on the bus, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a yoga teacher." And she was like, "Oh, I can't do yoga because I can't bend into a pretzel," kind of thing.
I hear that so much. It's like, that's what yoga's for. Like, you know, if you feel like you want to work on your flexibility, this is a great place to do it. And also, like, if you want to work on your self-love and just feeling good about yourself, like, that's what this practice is for.
Yeah, that's so true. So, well, first of all, I want to ask, because you guys work together, you podcast together, you're both yoga teachers. Do you have any advice for other people who are like working together as couples?
I think it's probably good that we have a bit of space within that. Like, I still teach classes out of the house, and we have separate rooms that we work in. Like, Rane has a Rane room, which is just filled with
this messy room.
Yeah. And I kind of have a little space that's kind of, I guess it would be our dining room, but it's pretty much my workspace. And we do different things. Like, Rane does the tech side of things, and I guess with the studio I do more of the customer service. Like, I take the phone calls and I answer the emails, and I kind of do more of the interacting side of things. So
I think we have sort of complementary skill sets, which is quite useful, quite handy. And yeah, I think we like to bounce ideas off each other.
And having done it on my own for so long, like I've been teaching yoga for about 13 years, it's so awesome having a business buddy. Like, it's so great.
Yeah.
I think that's what helps you as well, because if you are kind of doing your own entrepreneurial thing, like, sometimes it is a challenge to kind of stay positive and to stay motivated. and even just to know that you're on the right track with things. So it's actually really great having someone else that you can kind of talk through things with and just run decisions by. And
Yeah, and I also think, because I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but I'm relatively new to this whole yoga teaching business, and it's actually great having Jo as a kind of mentor. Even though, I'll argue with her on a lot of things. But you can't probably always get away with arguing with your mentor. But, for example, we teach a couple of classes together on Thursday evenings, and I actually really appreciate getting feedback from Jo on, what I can actually improve in my teaching. And it's just fun to be in the room together.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. I bet your students really love that energy as well.
I hope so.
It's been really funny actually, because before we reopened the studio, like as we were building our studio, our podcast has really grown as well. So we've had some people come to the studio and kind of say like, oh, we feel like we know you, or like your voices are so familiar. So it's kind of really funny to have that experience of like, I don't know, it's like they do already know us and they're already kind of at home here.
Yeah.
But we just met them.
Do you have anything that you would give just as closing notes for yoga teachers, just in general, like things that you wish you would have known right from day one, either just teaching or owning a studio?
This is the biggest yoga teaching cliche. Remember to do your own practice as well. And, not just practice on your mat, but self-care as well. And I think sometimes when you're doing your own business, you always have a massive to-do list. To remember that you're the person who wrote all of those things on that list. So they don't all have to happen today. And that list is never going to end. You're just going to keep adding things on because you're always going to do new things. So I guess have a realistic kind of goal as to how much you want to accomplish each day. And it really works for me that if one thing's just not working for me, just go to something else on the list, or, like I said before, clean your studio or do something different. Like if you feel like you're kind of at a bit of a brick wall with something, just try something different instead. Go to you, Rad. I'm going to have a bit more of a think about this.
Oh, no. I've got brain freeze, sorry.
I guess the other thing is to not be afraid to share what you love, because if this is a kind of self-driven career, don't feel like you've got to do what everyone thinks that you should do. Like if there's something that you really want to try, then try it. Like even if to other people it seems like a really crazy idea for a yoga class, or it seems like a really crazy idea to open a yoga studio in your house or anything like that, I think it's like so much better to try it in a low stakes, low stress way than to pigeonhole yourself into some little box doing what you think you should be doing when, like that could have just been made out of your own preconceptions.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. One more question, Jo, about the practice, your self-practices, or anything that helps you, because I know that over the years, my own practice has fallen away many times, where I'm like, oh, I just need to get back to that.
I actually find like the myofascial release stuff is great because it can be so low energy. You could just be like lying on the ground, rolling on some balls, and Jill Miller's book, The Role Model, is really comprehensive, and I feel like, especially if you're teaching a lot of classes and your body is quite worn out, that can be a really good self-practice, and that can absolutely lead into meditation. We also have a regular meditation practice on a good week every morning, and it's so easy to get off track with that as well, and we both feel the benefits so much, so recommitting to that is always a good thing for us.
Yeah, we might have mentioned this earlier, but once we built this building, it really sort of fired up our personal practice again, especially after having no space in the house for a few months to be able to do anything on your own. It was so good to be able to just go out there every morning, have this beautiful space to practice in, we really got back into it in a big way after that, I think.
Another thing that really is really important for me as well is regular massage. And I've always been lucky to know quite a few amazing massage therapists who I've just done swaps with. So I've just swapped massage for yoga, and because I couldn't afford to get a massage every 2 weeks or every month, but I'm happy to swap that many classes to make that happen.
Right.
And so that is really helpful for me, especially if you feel like your physical and energetic batteries are drained. Get a massage.
Oh, that's such a good point. Anything else that you would close out with for the yoga teachers who are kind of feeling like, either isolated or kind of, doubting their teaching?
I think everyone does feel that way sometimes. And maybe I think sometimes it can be good to, like, if you're struggling to establish yourself as a teacher, to like take the pressure off by maybe doing a bit of other work elsewhere, or maybe teaching some classes, in a workplace or a gym or somewhere that maybe isn't your dream yoga teaching gig, to hone your skills. Because often those gym classes, you really develop as a teacher, like catering to all of those different people in that room. And people really appreciate it. Like, you connect with people who would never walk into a studio. So even if your goal is to have your own space and that doesn't feel like it's happening, still kind of keep reaching out with your yoga and keep going with it.
Yeah, that's great.
And I guess as to the not feeling like they're good enough, just to plug one of our podcast episodes, but the episode we did with Lee Blaschke, who is one of the founders of Yoga Australia, the national peak body, he sort of mentioned that sometimes he feels like a fraud in front of the room. And if someone like that does, then I think that it's obviously something that is innate in a lot of humans.
Yeah, like we all doubt ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think as well, the more that you do teach, the more you get that direct feedback that you are actually helping people and you are actually making a difference in people's lives. And I think sometimes the things that we can beat ourselves up about as teachers, like maybe we fumbled over a word, or maybe we like did the left side 3 times or something, other people don't really notice as much. But like that love of that practice that we share is really what shines through. And I guess that comes back to, still staying with your own practice as well. Like, this is something that I'm sure many business coaches wouldn't agree with, but like setting targets for myself never works. Like, that just feels like a source of external pressure. Like, it's like, I don't need some target. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do my best. Like, so I think maybe sometimes having goals can be a little bit of a trap, because then we feel like we're failing at that goal. So maybe try and set yourself some goals that aren't outcome-based, that isn't about teaching this certain number of classes or making this amount of money from yoga teaching or kind of getting some high-profile gig, but maybe set yourself some goals that are more about fulfillment or something that's not quantifiable with numbers. Something that doesn't feel like a failure if you haven't hit a certain target.
If you don't hit it. That is a really great point, because I know exactly that. Those are the times when I feel like, I am not hitting my goal in my business. And you're right. I've often then set a goal of like, I'm going to do a daily practice for 30 days in a row. And that I can hit on my own, like no one else is responsible for that. But maybe it's like, I'm going to set a goal of going and getting a massage in the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I'm just going to think of something that I can do every day that's really little, that's self-care, and maybe something that I can do every day that's care for someone else.
Those are great. Well, thank you both so much for all of the work that you do in your own community with your podcast, and then also sharing with us today, like all of the things, all of the little details of having a home studio. It's been great.
Oh, I hope it's helpful for people. Like, thank you so much for having us on the podcast. And I get so much out of everything that you share as well. Like, it's such, because I teach Pilates as well, I could talk about the pelvic floor all day long. And I really love your perspective on it. And I feel like it's something that I don't really get as much access to in the kind of workshops that are on locally. So thank you so much for making that contribution to global knowledge about such an important area.
You're welcome. And so if people want to reach out, listen to your podcast, what is the best way that they can find you?
Well, our website's podcast.flowartist.com. We have a Facebook group, which is the Flow Artist Podcast Community.
My Instagram is Garden of Yoga, and I'm Garden of Yoga on Facebook as well. Our website is gardenofyoga.com.au. And I think that's all our things.
That's great. We'll be sure to link to it in the show notes. Thank you so much, you guys.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Well, Connected Yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. What is the one thing that you are taking away from today's episode? Are you feeling inspired to open a home-based studio? Are you changing something in the way that you offer yoga or where you offer yoga? What really stuck with you? What challenged you, or what made you think or feel differently about your own personal yoga business and your yoga offering? You can reach out to me in so many different ways. There is a voicemail button on our homepage. You can leave a comment in the show notes. You can tag me in a social media post. I love those. I'm trying to spend a little more time on Instagram. I'm pretty comfortable on Facebook. You will never find me on Twitter unless I'm checking something, and Facebook and Instagram have gone down. It's just the way it is. If you want to connect with me in person, we have a new group program for yoga teachers that is happening again. If you want to find out more about that or to register, visit theconnectedyogateacher.com under Work with Shannon. Look for group program. And in person, in the flesh, I'll be at the Toronto Yoga Show, March 29th to the 31st, 2019. And I'll be in Bermuda, April 5th to the 16th, teaching the 85-hour Mama Nurture prenatal yoga teacher training. That training is also happening in Meaford, Ontario, starting April 26th, and it's over 3 months. Then in November, after the summer in 2019, I'm sharing a 20-hour Yoga for Pelvic Health yoga teacher training. I would love to hear from you and love to meet up with you. If you are in or around any of those areas, let me know. If you want to reach out through email, I try and answer every single email. Okay, Connected Yoga teachers, time to sign off. Thank you to our team at the Connected Yoga Teacher. Really, you guys, you have made this episode possible. Also, thank you, listeners. It is such an honor to have this time to hang out together. And I want to ask you, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, to your practice, and to your community?